So I recently finished watching the Netflix anime show Good Night World, which for those of you who do not know is a sort of SAO-esque anime show that follows the story of a young boy called Taichiro, also known as Ichi, who is unfortunately from a very dysfunctional and abusive family household, and therefore he uses a fully immersive virtual reality game called Planet to escape from his real life issues and frustrations. Now, before I carry on with this video, I would just like to address a huge spoiler alert for everyone that hasn't seen the show. If you haven't seen the show or you are in the middle of watching it and haven't finished it yet, I highly recommend you click off this video and finish the show before you watch this video, because there are going to be spoilers ahead. So for everyone who didn't just click off, I can get into my review. So the first thing that I would like to talk about when it comes to this show is the premise / plot line of the storyline and the concept, because at least for me personally, this was the greatest part of the whole show. I stated earlier that the show was SAO-esque, meaning that it was similar to Sword Art Online. And in terms of like virtual reality and, you know, fully immersive VR games, that is true. But other than that, this show is very, very different from SAO. And my favourite thing about this show when compared to Sword Art Online was that in Sword Art Online, the concept was people who played the game became entrapped in the game and then couldn't escape. And if they died in the game, they would also die in real life. But as we saw in Good Night World, even people who didn't play the game, people that weren't fans or players of Planet, were sucked in and absorbed into the Blackbird's cyberspace, into the Blackbird's own virtual realm, because they had access to the internet via an electronic device, such as a mobile phone, a laptop, or an iPad, and they were infected by the Blackbird. That is my favourite part about this whole show, especially when compared to Sword Art Online, was that in Sword Art Online, if you didn't play the game, you were safe. But in this show, even if you didn't play the game, you were still unsafe. And that is my favourite thing about this show, about the plotline, was that nobody was safe. There was no mentality of, oh, well, if you want to be safe and don't want to die, don't want to get infected by the Blackbird, just don't play the game. Because that didn't make a difference. So, and another thing I really liked about the storyline and the premise of this show was how based it was when it came to AI. A lot of this story, a lot of this show was based around AI, around artificial intelligence, like the Blackbird and Pico, for example. And I think as we see in the real world, in real life, as AI is getting further and further advanced, I think stuff like this is really telling. And I'm not some form of conspiracy theorist that believes that AI is going to take over one day and then we're all going to die and the planet's going to turn into Terminator. Like, I don't believe that. But I think concepts and shows like these are really interesting, particularly when you think about how the planet and AI is developing and advancing further in terms of technology. The second thing that I would like to talk about is the characters, because the characters in this show were really good, but also the ones that were irrelevant were also really boring. So the characters in this show were a bit of a double-edged sword. They were either really interesting and cool, or they were really boring and irrelevant, and they probably weren't even worth having on the show, in my personal opinion. My favourite characters in this show were Taichiro / Ichi, Pico, and Kojiro, because they were arguably the main, most relevant characters in the show. Taichiro being the main character, Pico being Taichiro's best friend in AI before she was uninstalled. And maybe she wasn't super relevant, at least, but in my opinion she was, and I really enjoyed seeing her on the screen. I thought she was probably the most likeable character in the show. And then Kojiro, despite being a bit of a shitty person, is also really relevant and interesting because he is the creator of the game, he is the creator of Planet itself. And that pretty much does it for the characters of the show. Obviously, there were other characters involved in the show, like side characters and supporting characters, like the characters in the Pirate Guild, for example, Pico's friends. However, in my personal opinion, they weren't that interesting, they were quite boring, and they weren't super relevant. I feel like the show could have been just as good without them, maybe only slightly a little bit worse. But characters and storyline aside, the final thing that I want to talk about is, as always, the animation. Because I think the animation in this show was really good. Obviously not as good as, say, The Garden of Words or Suzume or Your Name, but the animation in this show was still really well done regardless, from the virtual reality realms of Planet to the characters themselves, even to the real life world, such as I believe we see the Tokyo Tower in this show quite a bit. And so all in all, the animation for the show was really well done. I wouldn't say it was a solid 10 out of 10 masterpiece, the best animation I've ever seen, but it certainly wasn't awful, it wasn't half-assed. The animation crew did a really, really good job with this show. And so all in all, would I recommend this show? Yes, 100%. I would recommend this show to people, especially if you are a fan of anime like Sword Art Online, for example. And all in all, I think I would give it a solid 8 to an 8.5 out of 10 in my personal opinion. Maybe a 7.5 at the lowest, but somewhere along that scale. And all of that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. I'm the Geeked Out Gaijin, signing out.